The story of the Golden State Killer is among the most complex and chilling crime cases in American history. This infamous criminal carried out a spree of burglaries, assaults, and murders across California from the mid-1970s until 1986. Today, in this video, we'll explore the Golden State Killer story, which unsolved after 4 decades later. But before we begin, if you're new to this channel, please like and subscribe. Now, let's dive into the story. Joseph James DeAngelo Jr., born November 8, 1945, is an American serial killer, rapist, burglar, and former police officer who committed at least 13 murders, 51 rapes, and over 120 burglaries throughout California between 1974 and 1986. He carried out 3 distinct crime sprees across California, each earning him a separate nickname in the media, before authorities discovered they were the work of the same individual. The Golden State Killer's crimes unfolded over more than a decade, marked by 3 distinct phases. The killer first became notorious in Visalia Ransacker between 1973 to 1976 in California, where he broke into over 100 homes. During these early crimes, he would ransack houses, steal small items, and create general chaos. He was also connected to the murder of Claude Snelling, a journalism professor killed while attempting to protect his daughter from an attempted kidnapping. Relocating to the Sacramento area, the killer escalated his crimes to sexual assaults, committing over 50 rapes across Sacramento and nearby counties. Between 1976 to 1979, his entry was typically through pried open windows or doors, targeting either lone women or couples. His terrifying methods included binding his victims with shoelaces and, for male victims, stacking plates or cups on their backs, threatening to kill everyone if he heard them fall. His attacks were meticulously planned, and he often surveilled his victims beforehand, even going as far as to call and harass them before and after the assaults. After leaving Sacramento, he moved south. He stayed in this phase from 1979 to 1986 and escalated to murder, becoming known as the original Night Stalker. His Southern California murders followed a chilling pattern of home invasion, assault, and murder. The first known killings occurred in Santa Barbara, where he murdered Robert Offerman and Deborah Manning. Over time, he was responsible for 13 known murders, often bludgeoning his victims and vanishing without a trace, leaving a trail of terror through Ventura, Goleta, Dana Point, and Irvine. For years, local and state investigators struggled to connect the crimes across different regions. They initially failed to recognize that the Visalia Ransacker, East Area Rapist, and original Night Stalker were all the same person. At that time, DNA technology was not yet available, and it wasn't until the 1980s that the crimes began to be linked through advances in forensic science. In 2001, DNA evidence definitively connected the East Area Rapist to the murders in Southern California, confirming that the 3 crime sprees were perpetrated by the same individual, who was subsequently dubbed the Golden State Killer. However, the case remained unsolved because the DNA collected from the crime scenes did not match any profiles in criminal databases. Investigators persevered, but the case eventually grew cold. The breakthrough occurred in 2018 when investigators employed a revolutionary technique known as genetic genealogy. This approach involves analyzing DNA collected from crime scenes and matching it to potential relatives in open-source genealogy databases. Investigators uploaded the DNA profile to a public genealogy site, GEDmatch, and discovered distant relatives of the Golden State Killer. By constructing family trees and narrowing down the list of suspects, they identified Joseph James DeAngelo, a former police officer, as a key suspect. DeAngelo had served as a police officer in Exeter, California, during the time of the Visalia Ransacker burglaries. Investigators then collected his DNA from an item he had discarded, which confirmed a match to DNA found at multiple crime scenes. On April 24, 2018, police arrested 72-year-old Joseph James DeAngelo at his home in Citrus Heights, California. DeAngelo had lived quietly for years as a mechanic and was known by his neighbors as a seemingly mild-mannered man. After his arrest, he gave a brief confession to law enforcement, claiming an alter ego named Jerry forced him to commit the crimes. DeAngelo initially pleaded guilty to 13 counts of murder and 13 counts of kidnapping. In June 2020, he reached a plea agreement that allowed him to avoid the death penalty in exchange for a guilty plea, which spared survivors and victims' families the anguish of a lengthy trial. In August 2020, DeAngelo was sentenced to multiple life terms, without the possibility of parole. At the sentencing hearing, survivors and victims' families gave emotional statements, describing the pain and suffering he inflicted on them. DeAngelo sat motionless and expressionless throughout, only briefly apologizing in court for his crimes. Photos of the victims, tragically taken by a silent killer who brutally assaulted and murdered them,